In the shadowed corridors of ancient empires and the gleaming boardrooms of modern titans, power has always been a silent predator, lurking in the guise of opportunity or threat. It whispers promises to the ambitious and threats to the fearful, shaping destinies with invisible hands. Amidst this eternal dance, there emerges a singular truth, etched into the annals of human struggle: the one thing you must never do in the presence of power is to reveal your vulnerability unchecked. To bare your soul's fractures without armor is to invite the blade. Yet, woven into this caution is a deeper revelation: the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. This is the story of Elias Thorne, a man forged in the fires of betrayal and rebirth, whose journey unfolds not as a chronicle of events, but as a living testament to these immutable laws. Through the labyrinth of his life, we traverse the realms of ambition, ruin, and unbreakable resolve, where power tests the spirit and only the self-mastered emerge unscathed. Elias was born in the crumbling outskirts of a forgotten industrial town, where the air hung heavy with the rust of abandoned factories and the dreams of generations long defeated. His father, a once promising engineer reduced to a shadow by corporate greed, would sit by the flickering light of a single bulb, recounting tales of how he had once stood before the mighty, only to crumble under their gaze. "Never show them your fear, son," he'd murmur, his voice a rasp of regret. "But I did, and they devoured me." Elias absorbed these words like a sponge, yet in his youth, he mistook them for mere caution. He grew tall and lean, with eyes that burned like embers in the night, harboring a quiet hunger for something more than the drudgery that claimed his kin. The town of Harrogate was ruled not by elected officials, but by the iron fist of Harlan Industries, a conglomerate that swallowed livelihoods and spat out broken men. Victor Harlan, the patriarch, was power incarnate, a man whose presence could silence rooms and bend wills with a glance. Elias, at 22, found himself thrust into this arena when he secured a lowly position in the company's assembly line. It was there, amid the clamor of machines and the sweat of labor, that he first encountered the gravitational pull of authority. His supervisor, a petty tyrant named Graves, wielded his sliver of power like a whip, lashing out at workers to mask his own insecurities. Elias watched as colleagues bowed, their spirits eroding with each humiliation. He vowed silently to rise above it, to climb the ladder not by submission, but by cunning. One fateful evening, as the factory lights dimmed, Elias overheard a conversation in the shadows of the loading dock. Graves was conspiring with a rival firm to sabotage Harlan's latest prototype, a revolutionary engine that could redefine energy production. The betrayal was born of envy. Graves had been passed over for promotion, his weak self festering like an untreated wound. Elias's heart raced. Here was his chance. He could expose the plot, earn favor, and ascend. But, in his eagerness, he forgot the cardinal rule. Approaching Harlan's office the next day, he burst in unannounced, his voice trembling with the weight of revelation. "Sir, I have information that could save your company," he stammered, laying bare his ambition and the fear of rejection in one breath. Harlan, seated behind a desk of polished oak, regarded him with eyes like polished steel. The room was a sanctum of power, lined with trophies of conquests, mergers, acquisitions, lives altered. Elias felt the air thicken, but he pressed on, spilling details without strategy, his vulnerability on full display. He expected gratitude, perhaps a reward. Instead, Harlan leaned back, a faint smile curling his lips. "Young man, you've just handed me a weapon. But, tell me, why should I trust a rat who sneaks into the lion's den?" Elias faltered, his weak self exposed, the boy from the outskirts, desperate for approval. In that moment, he had done the unforgivable, shown power his unguarded flank. The consequences unfolded like a meticulously planned siege. Harlan, ever the strategist, used Elias's tip to crush the sabotage but twisted the narrative. Graves was fired, but Elias was painted as an accomplice, his testimony dismissed as self-serving fabrication. Whispers spread through the factory: Elias was ambitious, untrustworthy, a threat. Promotions evaporated, isolation set in. Colleagues averted their eyes, fearing association with the fallen. Elias returned home each night to his father's knowing gaze, the old man's words echoing, "You showed them your fear." But it was more than fear, it was the raw, unrefined self, the part that begged for validation in the presence of might. Exile came swiftly. Harlan's influence extended beyond the factory walls, blacklisting Elias from any decent job in Harrogate. He wandered the streets, his mind a storm of resentment and reflection. In the quiet hours, he dissected his mistake. Power, he realized, was not a benevolent force to be petitioned, it was a mirror that amplified weaknesses. To approach it naked was suicide. But destruction loomed, and, in the depths of his despair, Elias encountered the second truth. Staring into the cracked mirror of his rented room, he saw not just a defeated man, but the fragments of his weak self, the hesitations, the pleas for mercy, the unbridled emotions that had betrayed him. Destroy this, he whispered to his reflection, and no one can touch you. Thus began the first part of his transformation, a solitary forge where he hammered away at his frailties. He devoured books pilfered from the local library, treatises on strategy by ancient generals, philosophies of stoicism that preached mastery over the inner chaos. He trained his body in the abandoned warehouses, pushing through pain until exhaustion became a companion. Sleep was rationed, meals were sparse. Each dawn, he recited affirmations not of false confidence, but of calculated indifference. I am the architect of my fortress. He practiced conversations in the mirror, masking intent behind layers of composure. Vulnerability was not eradicated, it was buried deep, accessible only to him, a tool rather than a liability. Months blurred into a year. Elias emerged leaner, sharper, his eyes no longer embers but forged steel. He left Harrogate under the cover of night, hitchhiking to the sprawling metropolis of Eldridge City, where power pulsed through skyscrapers and shadowed alleys alike. There, he reinvented himself as a consultant, offering insights into industrial efficiencies, knowledge gleaned from the factory floor but polished with newfound acumen. His first client was a mid-tier firm, Apex Dynamics, led by a woman named Lydia Voss, whose ambition rivaled Harlan's but lacked his ruthlessness. Approaching Voss was a test. Elias scheduled a meeting through proper channels, presenting not as a supplicant but as an equal. In her opulent office, overlooking the city's veins of traffic, he laid out his proposal with precision, no tremor in his voice, no plea in his eyes. When she probed for weaknesses, questioning his background, he deflected with facts, revealing only what served him. My past is irrelevant, my value is in the future I can build for you. Voss, sensing no chink in his armor, hired him on the spot. Success followed, contract after contract, as Elias navigated the corridors of influence without once baring his soul. Yet power's allure is insidious, and Elias soon found himself drawn into larger games. Apex's growth attracted predators, chief among them Harlan Industries, which sought to acquire it through hostile means. Voss confided in Elias, her trust a fragile bridge. We can't let him win, she said, her own vulnerabilities flickering, doubt in her leadership, fear of failure. Elias advised caution, but, inwardly, he saw opportunity. This was his arena now, the weak self destroyed, replaced by a man impervious to external blades. As negotiations intensified, Elias positioned himself as Voss's strategist. In boardrooms where egos clashed like thunder, he observed the dance, executives revealing tells through nervous gestures, unguarded words. Harlan himself appeared via video link, his presence still commanding, but Elias met it with equanimity. No resentment showed, no history invoked. When Harlan attempted to undermine him, I recall a young upstart from Harrogate. Elias responded with a measured smile. Memories fade, Mr. Harlan. Results endure. In that exchange, he adhered to the rule, never expose vulnerability. Harlan's probes found no purchase, and the acquisition faltered. But victory was not without cost. Voss, in her relief, grew close to Elias, sharing confidences that blurred professional lines. One evening, over dim lights in a rooftop lounge, she confessed her fears, the weight of legacy, the isolation of command. Elias listened, his own past a ghost he kept chained. Yet, as she leaned in, vulnerability tempting reciprocity, he felt the pull. To share would be to humanize, but, in power's presence, even hers, it was forbidden. He withdrew gently, steering conversation to strategy. Focus on the fortress, he said, echoing his inner mantra. Elias's rise accelerated. Word spread of the consultant who turned tides without flinching. He amassed a network, not through alliances of the heart, but through mutual utility. In Eldridge's underbelly, he encountered figures of shadowed power, financiers who manipulated markets, politicians who traded favors like currency. Among them was Darius Kane, a venture capitalist whose empire spanned continents, built on the ruins of competitors. Kane sought Elias for a high-stakes merger, one that could redefine global trade. Their first meeting was in Kane's penthouse, a realm of glass and gold overlooking the city like a god's perch. Kane tested him immediately, delving into personal queries disguised as rapport. "What drives a man like you, Elias? Ambition? Revenge?" The air crackled with intent. To answer honestly would reveal cracks. Elias parried. "Efficiency, Mr. Kane. The elimination of waste in business and in self." Kane nodded, impressed by the opacity. The deal proceeded, but, as complexities arose, rival bids, regulatory hurdles, Kane's own weaknesses surfaced. He confided in Elias during a late-night session, admitting doubts about his legacy, fears of obsolescence. Power slips through fingers, Kane murmured, his guard down. Elias saw the opening. Rather than exploit it overtly, he used it to fortify his position. He proposed solutions that positioned him as indispensable, all while maintaining his impenetrable facade. When rivals attempted sabotage, leaking false intel to undermine Kane, Elias countered with precision, his destroyed weak self leaving no emotional residue to cloud judgment. The merger succeeded, catapulting Elias into the echelons he once dreamed of. Yet, in quiet moments, he reflected, destruction of the weak self was not erasure of humanity, but its refinement. Emotions existed, but they served him, not the other way around. As years wove their tapestry, Elias's influence expanded. He founded Thorn Enterprises, a firm advising on corporate warfare, its logo a stylized anvil, symbol of forging strength from frailty. Clients flocked, CEOs facing coups, entrepreneurs battling giants. In each engagement, he embodied the truths. Never reveal vulnerability in power's presence, destroy the weak self to become indestructible. One client, a young innovator named Mira Sol, mirrored his younger self. Her startup threatened entrenched players, drawing the ire of conglomerates like Harlan's remnants. Victor had passed, but his son carried the torch. Mira approached Elias with raw passion, her pitch laced with personal stakes. "This is my life's work. I can't lose it." In her eyes, he saw the vulnerability he once displayed. Guiding her, he taught subtly. "Present facts, not fears. Let them see the steel, not the forge." The confrontation came in a high-profile arbitration. Harlan Jr., arrogant and untested, sought to dismantle Myra's company through litigation. In the sterile conference room, power hung like a blade. Mira, coached by Elias, held firm, her weak self tempered. When Harlan probed, "You're out of your depth, girl," she responded with data, unflinching. Elias watched from the sidelines, his role advisory, but his presence a shield. Harlan faltered, his own insecurities bubbling, impatience, entitlement. In that moment, the rule asserted itself, Harlan revealed his hand, and Mira struck. Victory solidified Elias's legend. Mira thrived, crediting him not just for strategy, but for the inner alchemy he imparted. "You showed me how to destroy the parts that hold us back," she said later. Elias nodded, knowing the journey was eternal. Power evolved, but the principles endured. Yet, no ascent is without trials. Elias faced his greatest test when an old ghost resurfaced. Graves, the supervisor from Harrogate, now a bitter operative for a shadowy syndicate, targeted Thorn Enterprises. Leaks, smears, attempts to unearth Elias's past. Graves sought vengeance, believing Elias's tip had ruined him. The attacks were personal, designed to provoke vulnerability. In the heat of it, Elias convened his team in the war room of his headquarters, a sleek space of monitors and maps. "They want us to react," he said calmly. "We respond with precision." Internally, memory stirred the factory, the betrayal, but his weak self was long ashes. He orchestrated countermeasures, legal barrages, counterintelligence, all without a trace of emotion betraying him. When Graves confronted him directly, in a dimly lit parking garage, spewing accusations, "You destroyed me," Elias regarded him coolly. "You destroyed yourself by letting weakness rule." Graves lunged, but security intervened. The syndicate crumbled under exposure, Graves arrested. In the aftermath, Elias stood on his balcony, the city sprawled below. Power had tested him repeatedly, but he remained unbroken. The man who destroys his weak self invites no destruction from others. It was not invincibility of body, but, of spirit, a fortress built from ruins. This narrative continues in the second part, where Elias's principles are tested in realms beyond commerce, delving into the personal and philosophical depths. Elias's empire, now a beacon in Eldridge, attracted not just clients but disciples. Young minds sought his counsel, drawn by tales of the unyielding strategist. Among them was Theo, a brilliant but fragile analyst whose intellect masked a turbulent soul. Theo's story intertwined with Elias's, serving as a mirror to the master's path. Hired for his acumen in data warfare, Theo excelled in simulations but faltered in real stakes. During a crisis involving a client's data breach, Theo panicked in a meeting with the board, his voice cracking as he admitted uncertainties. The room, filled with power brokers, sensed blood. Accusations flew, trust eroded. Elias intervened post-meeting, pulling Theo aside. "You showed them the crack. Never do that." Theo, eyes wide, confessed his fears: imposter syndrome, the weight of expectations. Elias recognized the weak self, untamed. "Destroy it," he advised. Not with denial, but with fire. Confronted alone, rebuild stronger. Theo took heed, embarking on his own forge, meditation, rigorous self-analysis, simulated confrontations. Months later, in another high-wire negotiation, Theo stood firm, his transformation evident. The client secured, Theo unbreakable. But Elias's life was not solely professional. In the quiet interstices, he navigated personal power dynamics. He met Celine, a curator of ancient artifacts, whose world of history complemented his strategic mind. Their connection sparked in a gallery, amid relics of fallen empires. Celine, with her poised demeanor, challenged him intellectually, but power lingered even in intimacy. Early on, she probed his past, sensing guarded depths. "What haunts you, Elias?" To reveal would violate the rule. Vulnerability in her presence, though not corporate, was still a risk. He shared fragments, controlled, ensuring no weak self emerged. Their relationship deepened, a dance of equals. Yet, when Celine faced her own trial, a museum scandal threatening her career, her vulnerabilities surfaced. Accused of mishandling funds by a jealous board, she confided in Elias, tears betraying her. He supported without reciprocity, guiding her to confront the weak self, the people-pleaser, the avoider of conflict. "Destroy it, and they can't touch you." Celine, inspired, fought back with evidence and poise, emerging victorious. Their bond strengthened, built on mutual strength. As Elias aged, his influence permeated society. Invited to speak at forums, he wove the truths into parables, never directly, but through stories like his own veiled journey. In the presence of power, he'd say, "Guard your essence. And, remember, true invincibility comes from within." Audiences nodded, but few grasped the depth the solitary destruction required. A pivotal moment came with the rise of a new adversary, the Collective, a tech consortium wielding AI and data as weapons. Led by an enigmatic figure known as Nexus, they targeted traditional firms like Thorns, deeming them obsolete. Nexus, a collective mind of algorithms and humans, represented power evolved, impersonal, omnipresent. Elias saw the challenge, not flesh, but code. Preparing for confrontation, Elias delved deeper into self-mastery. He incorporated mindfulness, not for peace, but for sharper control. When the Collective launched cyber assaults, leaking fabricated scandals about Elias's past, he responded not with fury, but strategy. Publicly, he addressed the smears with facts, no emotion. Privately, he traced the attacks, countering with his own digital arsenal. The climax unfolded in a virtual summit, where Nexus's avatar faced Elias. "You are relic," it intoned, probing for weakness, references to Harrogate, lost family. Elias, his weak self obliterated, replied, "Relics endure when built on stone." The exchange turned tides, allies rallied, the Collective fractured under internal doubts. In victory, Elias reflected on the philosophy's universality. power was not just hierarchical, it permeated relationships, self, society. The one thing never to do: expose vulnerability unchecked. And, the antidote: destroy the weak self. This leads to the third part, where Elias confronts the ultimate test: legacy and mortality, affirming the eternal truths. Elias, now in his twilight years, beheld his creation, Thorn Enterprises, a global force, its principles embedded in curricula worldwide. Yet, power's final guise is time, eroding all. Health faltered, a subtle ailment, whisper of decline. In hospital solitude, he faced the weak self's remnants, fear of oblivion, regret for paths untaken. But destruction was habitual. He confronted it, journaling thoughts, meditating on impermanence. Even in death's presence, guard the core, he wrote. Emerging stronger, he focused on succession. His heir apparent, a protégé named Arya, embodied potential but harbored doubts. Grooming her, Elias imparted the lessons. During a board coup attempt by disloyal executives, Arya stood in the fray. Probed for weaknesses, she held firm, her weak self destroyed under Elias's tutelage. The coup failed, Arya ascended. In his final days, surrounded by Selene and disciples, Elias shared the full narrative, not as confession, but legacy. Remember the rule, he said. And the power within. Elias passed peacefully, his story enduring. Generations invoked his truths, in boardrooms, battles, hearts. The man who destroys his weak self lives eternal, untouchable by others. Through Elias's Odyssey, the document of human resilience unfolds, a story of caution, transformation, triumph. Power bows to the mastered soul. Word count, approximately 8,000.